Hello and welcome to Business Today. Greetings on India's 75th Independence Day. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching our special edition of the Business Today show. In 1947, India had been left a nation divided, deindustrialized and with mass poverty. 75 years since, and today we can hope that India will eradicate poverty and move towards mass prosperity. The question is, what will it take us to achieve that goal, hopefully by 2047, the 100th year of our independence? And to debate that, I am joined by Sanjeev Bajaj, President, CII and Chairman and MD of Bajaj Finserv; Sanjeev Puri, Vice President of CII and Chairman and MD of ITC; Chandrajit Banerjee, the DG of CII; and Rajan Nawani, the Chairman of the CII Council on India at 75 and the Vice Chairman and MD of the Jetline Group. Let me first begin this show by playing out for you, our viewers, a small clip of what the Prime Minister said from the ramparts of the Red Fort.
मेरा देश विकसित देश होगा, डेवलप कंट्री होगा। विकास के हर पैरामीटर में हम मानव केंद्रीय व्यवस्था को विकसित करेंगे। हमारे केंद्र में मानव होगा, हमारे केंद्र में के मानव की आशा आकांक्षाएं होगी। हम जानते हैं, भारत जब बड़े संकल्प करता है तो करके भी दिखाता है।
Sanjeev Bajaj, I am coming to you with that point and taking off from what the Prime Minister said. Viksit Bharat, a developed India, not just a developing India. What do you think it will take us to get there? At least 7% of annual growth for the next 25 years to hit that target and hopefully become the second largest economy in the world. Sanjeev Bajaj, that question was for you.
Sure. Let me firstly start by wishing a happy 75th Independence, Siddharth, to you and to all your viewers. I think a number of areas need to be focused on. One is that we need to ensure that we are able to provide education, quality healthcare and livelihood for all Indians, not just as a responsibility, but to ensure that the bottom 40%, 50% of our economy end up becoming a large market for everyone as well. So the first is to ensure that it also helps to create an inclusive India. The second is to be able to build capacity and capability. And within this, the government's PLI schemes, 14 schemes that have already been, or 14 sectors that have already been included. CII has a few more suggestions ready. How can we use these to create national champions across these sectors, not only for the domestic market, but for the world? The third is to use employment-linked incentive schemes. And this is something that CII has been recommending because a number of sectors, whether it's tourism, whether it's digital animation, games, they have a large employment potential and need as well. So how do we incentivize those? This to me is important. And finally, I would say building a strong Atmanirbhar financial services sector is very key if we have to give wings to all these other sectors so that we can play the role of a developed country in the coming years.
A good point that you make there, Sanjeev Bajaj, from PLI to ELI. We'll pick that up, but I want to come to you, Sanjeev Puri. Is 7% growth possible? You represent a company that knows the pulse of India and more importantly, the pulse of Bharat. Do you think that kind of growth is possible and what will it take us to get there?
Well, let me start also by wishing you and all the viewers a very happy Independence Day. And I'm extremely optimistic. I think that not only 7%, there is potential to grow beyond 7%. Not only because there is a huge and growing consuming market in India, and besides that, I think the world is also emerging as a big opportunity in many areas where we can play to India's strengths. And I think many of the pillars are already in place. in India initiative, the PLI schemes in the agri sector like FPO, the agri infrastructure. So many of the building blocks are in place, and some additional facets need to come in, like some of which my colleague just alluded to. So really to meet that aspiration and beyond, I think three things to my mind are very important. One is that investments to scale up manufacturing capacity to meet the growing demands of India, as well as the global, to make a mark in the global arena. And I think the private sector has the capacity, and the outlook is very positive. And that's something that we should see unfolding over a period of time. The second is really to take world-class Indian brands onto global stage. And as Indian enterprises acquire that scale and stature, I think beyond exporting unbranded produce, we have to move to a stage where we start exporting branded produce that anchor value chains in India. That's where the employment aspect also will get addressed. And the third bit is to transform the agriculture sector. And there's a huge opportunity through digitization and the emerging technologies that are being developed, particularly by the agri-tech players. There's a lot of technology that can do good to agriculture. We also need to integrate R&D and innovation into it. And of course, we also need to deal with the issues of the climate crisis. On one hand, it is decarbonization. At the same time, considering that the 2 degrees is going to happen, we also need to learn to live with it. So adaptation is also going to assume a very critical role, and that's particularly important for the vulnerable sections of the society.
Absolutely. That's a good point there, because India won't become a developed country without the agriculture sector doing far better, and we'll have to take the consequences of climate change into effect, because it affects that part of our economy more than perhaps the richer parts. Chandrajit, another point that the Prime Minister spoke about today, Jan Anusandhan, innovation, and that's the story that is really driving much of the change in the financial sector, for example, that Sanjeev Bajaj alluded to. What do you think about that particular term that was emphasized by the Prime Minister today with regard to innovation?
This is a very, very, very critical aspect of success of many of the visions that we are setting for ourselves, which the Honorable Prime Minister set for ourselves, for a developed nation. And innovation, technology, R&D, these are very key factors that really need to become a part of our culture, DNA in the Indian industry and beyond. And in fact, the way I see it, it's going to be very, very crucial for India to be at the forefront of technology and innovation if we are going to achieve the high economic growth that we are talking about. And our objective would really be to increase R&D spending of 2% of GDP, with a higher proportion really coming from the industry from the current what we have about 0.7%. So how do we promote PPPs, private sector partnership in R&D? The beginning has been made, as you know, in the defense sector. In the last budget, we had 25% of the government's defense R&D budget being opened for the private sector. So we need a lot more really happening. The Indian design policy, so to say. Also, we need to have a phenomenal focus on that strategic design. So these are what's going to put India on the high table, because we cannot be a technologically not advanced nation if we are going to be a developed nation Sanjeev added to the PLI, ELI. I would really like to hear add a TLI, a technology led incentives. Sure, I mean, I see the government getting a huge opportunity to launch technology and innovation programs in a sort of a mission mode. On one, addressing the global challenges like climate change, which was talked about, public health, urbanization, and two long-term technology areas such as artificial intelligence, genomics, robotics, nanotechnology, blockchain, etc. So all of this would be requiring coordination and partnership, as I was talking about, and to enable, I think, 4 elements of national research quad of industry, academia, R&D and R&D lab startups. They must work in tandem with a very strong and appropriate sort of a government mechanism. And lastly, given the high geopolitical or rather geopoliticized nature of technology, it is important to very much integrate technology partnerships within our overall diplomacy agenda to facilitate the G2G technology collaborations. So I feel innovations, technology, R&D is going to be a very key defining factor of India to be a developed nation by 2047.
Rajan, as the chairman of the CII Council on India at 75, let's assume 25 years later, somebody else will, on behalf of CII, will be looking at India at 100. What is industry's role in achieving this? Because while we heard the term employment-linked incentive and technology-led incentive, I haven't heard these before from industry at least. What is industry's role in getting this growth going and make it possible?
I think firstly, again, a very happy Independence Day to you and to all the viewers. We've come a long way as a country in 75 years of independence, but a deep-rooted culture of thousands of years. So I think we are celebrating all of that today. And, as you asked me to look forward into the next 25 years, Siddharth, I think the role of industry is going to be absolutely key. And if you look at the past 15 years, CII industry led a platform that brought multiple stakeholders together to really discuss, talk about India and its future, not only capture the aspirations, but also help draft a roadmap that will make that happen. But no country can progress to becoming a Viksit Bharat if we do not truly have economic strength. So, building great economic strength and maximizing our potential there, technological vitality, not only into our industries to be able to be globally competitive, but also being able to, percolate that into different aspects of society so that society at large can become more efficient. And of course, our Prime Minister talked about it. How do we build a Bharat, on the strong principles of moral leadership? How do we create a corrupt-free India? And what's the role that industry and everyone can play to make all of that happen? So I think, in our accelerated change process from here over the next 25 years, I think besides being a convening platform for multiple stakeholders in the country, I think building trust with government, building trust with society, industry will play a key role. And 2 sectors of society I think will drive a large part of this. One is definitely our Yuva Shakti, the youth as we talk about. And they have you've seen business, unicorns, in sports, in every area, Prime Minister talked about it. And the Nari Shakti, I think bringing more women into the workforce, seeing how women can contribute both through industry and otherwise in helping shape that India, I think are very important, areas that can happen. And the areas, of course, agri-tech, agriculture, manufacturing, services, sustainability, digital platforms, education, infrastructure, healthcare, governance, there's every role for industry to come and play, both sectorally and, of course, across many of these areas for the future.
Right. Rajan, good points there. Sanjeev Bajaj, I'm coming back to you. Many decades ago, our savings rate went up. A culture of savings in formal financial institutions started with the advent of branches. People don't realize that we didn't have enough branches for people to even save. So that was also one of the reasons India was a cash economy. Today, you spoke about the financial sector and how it can contribute to growth in India and perhaps also develop models of industry which will reduce costs. How confident are you that the financial sector of India can play a significant role in providing the capital that is necessary for this kind of growth in infrastructure, growth in society, and overall output as well?
This will require a combination of I would say, a conflux of savings, domestic savings getting channelized into productive financial products, It will be about regulation that allows these savings to be redeployed for productive purposes. And then it's, of course, innovation and I would say aspiration of the financial services industry. We have seen a lot of this, Siddharth. Let's look at just the last 6 months where foreign investors took out over $35 billion from the Indian stock markets. If it weren't for the common man's SIP money that helped buffer the slide, we would have seen a much lower stock market, and that would have had its own negative results. So domestic savings have already started playing a significant role. But we have to see how we can channelize this more and more. For example, today, anywhere in the world, it is insurance money and pension money, which is long-term money. These should go towards long-term asset creation. Whereas currently our rules are restricted and most of this money goes into short-term or medium-term investments, including a large part of it into government treasuries. Now, I believe that this is something that the regulators are looking at very actively and are looking at opening it up. So we have to progress in liberalizing some of these, I would say, restrictions that we have had. Do it sensibly, do it in a manner where it can be monitored and it can be grown over a period of time. But clearly, as an economy that is growing, I mean, this year is going to be an anomaly, but otherwise, that's an economy that can grow between 7 and 10%. And we must grow at that rate over the next decade or two. We have to see that we channelize our domestic savings and attract foreign capital. We need both of those to be able to lift our businesses into a higher size, into a higher set of capabilities, so that they can then contribute not only for domestic consumption, but for international as well.
Sanjeev Bajaj, it's also a sign of the times and the return of confidence in Indian industry that you mentioned 10%, at least to me, because I haven't heard 10% from members of industry for the past few years, and compliments to you for that. Sanjeev Puri, I'm coming to you on a slightly different question, but this is to do with India's place and India's economy relative to what is happening in our neighborhood. And since we are debating on the day of our independence, in 1947, you know what India was left with by the British. But look at what is happening in our neighborhood. Most countries in deep economic trouble. And yet India, despite everything, has reached here, and whatever you do, people remain hopeful. Why is this? Because you are, again, and I repeat that point, you are a company that operates in the deepest parts of India. You know the pulse of the people. Why are we different from the rest of our neighborhood?
So it's a great question, Siddharth. I think it's a proud moment for all of us that after 75 years, we are a very vibrant democracy, a force for global, recognized globally. And I think there are multiple factors that have contributed to this. Certainly, I think the manner in which the economy has been steered by the policymakers, and more so in the recent past, where a lot of purposive steps have been taken for economic development and as well as inclusive growth. It's also about the strengths of the institutions that are prevailing in India. And, for example, the manner in which the RBI has very astutely steered the economy through this difficult, macro situation, the short-term challenges, I think is the strength of the institutions. And last but not least of all, I think it's also the capability and resilience of Indians. I think the capability of Indians is also visible at a global stage. If you look at the kind of contributions that the Indian diaspora has made across enterprises, across creating new businesses, new value chains and innovations. So that demonstrates the intellectual capital of the country, and more importantly, also the resilience of the people and the will to succeed. I think all that is also visible from the manner in which India rebounded from the pandemic. I think that really shows the resilience of the entire collective resilience of the nation, and the capacity to develop and leverage technology is also visible from the manner in which vaccinations were developed and the speed with
Right.
which so many people were vaccinated. I think that is a feat that is unparalleled. So these are essentially, I think, the reasons why we have succeeded, and these are also the reasons I believe that will help us succeed as we move ahead, because our foundation is much stronger, and the Honorable Prime Minister has also spoken about a bigger resolve going forward from every entity of the society, and that should propel us to a much better trajectory going forward.
Okay, and before I take closing comments from the other speakers, just for the sake of our viewers, we'll bring up our forex reserves and our exports. 1951, India's exports, in fact, the forex reserves were just over $2 billion in 1950-51. And in 2021, nearly $577 billion. In the context of our neighborhood, that should tell you about how India has continued to grow. There have been dips, there have been difficult times. And if you look at the exports as well, you will see from $18 billion just about 3 decades ago to almost $420 plus billion, and we'll soon reach at least $500 billion. And that's the story for GDP as well. Chandrajit, I'm coming to you, and this is to do with the Aam Aadmi kind of position. Amidst all of this, we have also seen high taxation in some ways, along with inflation, being a burden on the Aam Aadmi. And if consumption is what drives India's story, clearly that is always going to have a play. A bulk of the tax reforms have been done. Industry got a good break with the reduction in the corporate tax rate cut. Come next budget, what do you think should be there in terms of the focus of the government as far as consumption specifically is concerned, Chandrajit?
So, what I would really like to see is, the continuing or rather an accelerated focus on the rural economy. And I think that's going to be very, very important. We need a very, very strong and a vibrant rural economy. So that can be led a lot by strong public spending. And I would really like a lot more intervention on that. That's going to be a very, very, very key area on infrastructure, on education, on creating a strong rural economy, so to which will really act as a strong accelerator of creating demand, as we were discussing. The other very important point, which you talked about, what should we see in the next budget, as far as to see how we are able to increase consumption demand, which is going to be very, very key again, is we have done a lot as far as tax is concerned. I would think one big time has now come, which was there 7 years back. We talked about personal income tax. We need to bring that back. We need to cut the personal income tax. We need to call spade a spade, and that's one important area which would really help. The tax buoyancy in India is very strong at this point in time. We see strong collection because the economy has done well. We have seen GST settling down. So we need a little bit of moderation in the GST in terms of the slabs, but very importantly, to see to it that we are able to increase consumption, we need more money in the hands of people, and that's really required across the board. Increase, decrease the income tax. It's something which we have not said in the past. We have been
right.
and really spread get a wider tax base. But a lower tax regime is something that we would really like to see in this budget, which will be a very, very bold move by the government.
Rajan, final comments on the show to you, and I'm going to take that point that Chandrajit made about relief for the Aam Aadmi. As a member of industry, what would you say requires to be done in order to ensure that a government which is now getting its revenue position back on track, and very significantly, both on the direct tax and the indirect tax front, there are some worries as far as certain states are concerned. What do you think needs to be done? A good cut in taxation for the Aam Aadmi to further spur consumption?
That definitely is one of the points, Siddharth. But I think when I look at the Aam Aadmi and, really looking at India unlocking its true potential, I think, universal literacy implicitly built into our system is definitely a massive requirement. Affordable healthcare for all, a big challenge that we've seen through coming out through this era. We do have an opportunity and a potential to make all of that happen. How do we ensure that, whether it's mobility, it's infrastructure, the ease of living in a way, how do we enable that for an Aam Aadmi? I think there are so many dreams, which I think the aspiration on a day like this should capture and actually enable us to think large. The Prime Minister talked of creating big sankalps, and I think that is a time for us today to be able to do that. Like freedom was there, in the 40s. The next big sankalp really has to make the life affluent for every Indian in the future. So if we do really grow economically to the position that we've been talking, I think these are basic things that we have to ensure, across everywhere. And the role of, again, technology, will be immense in this, right? I mean, we don't know what the world will look like, but, you could be in a metaverse transacting on a decentralized blockchain. The Aam Aadmi has to be able to, fit into that world. Actually, for us to really make it effective, India has to lead us into that.
Absolutely. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Anusandhan, Jai Vigyan, and if I may add, Jai Taxpayer as well. I'm going to leave it at that. India at 75 with hopes, prayers and aspirations for India at 100. And I thank my entire panel for their time with us today, and you, the viewer. Once again, a very, very happy Independence Day to you and your loved ones. With that, it's a wrap on this show. Bye-bye.